Hi everybody. Let me just get over here my presentation and we're gonna start our slideshow. Sorry, my computer is a little slow with that stuff. um, my name is Julia Lavala and I'm here to do the presentation for Family Talk for ECD 322 for cognition, general knowledge, science, math, and logical thinking. The context of my classroom, it's for my age, for my kids, my students, it's 1 to 2, and the developmental stage is typical math learning for this age and consistent in small things such as noticing changes in objects they frequently use and using sign language to communicate. We do, of course, introduce a couple words, and we do have children who are speaking more than others, but it's also very they're it's common for them to have more words, some children to speak a little bit more than others. It can also be seen in attempts to fit toys and objects into a box until they find the right thing. So this is a lot of like trial and error for this age group. um, one quote that I found from supporting early math learning and for infants and toddlers, that infants and toddlers begin to develop math concept and skills in the first year of life, but they're really natural mathematicians. In fact, new research shows that children might have innate or inborn understanding of math concepts that involve quantities. Even without adult support, we see infants and toddlers using math concepts to make sense of the word. um, Building relationship first. One way of starting this communication about math with parents would be firstly establish a relationship with parents by communicating more often about, positive daily activities, events. One thing I always like to do is I find little moments of positive things, even the children who are more stubborn or just, a little bit has a stronger personality. Bring instances of students showing interest in mathematical activities to parents and start a conversation about whether this was something that worked at home. Um, One example is I have one little kid in my classroom. He's really, really smart. And I was like, hey, he's doing really good with his animals, with his colors and shapes. And mom was like, oh yeah, I do flashcards. We practice a lot at home. So just bringing those little positive moments can start the conversation. Another thing I would do, is invite parents to continue activities that children have showed interest in the classroom. Whenever I find an activity that the kids really, really enjoy, that's where I go, hey, let's use that at home. They really enjoyed this, and like we can modify this way or that way at home, and invite parents to participate in the classroom activities whenever possible. Knowing and planning for math talk is show interest when pointing out that children was interested in a specific activity, and ask about ways to modify or bring examples of activity they might do it at home, like I mentioned previously. I'll bring up topics while observing my students and pointing out to parents the specific interest they're showing, or if there's a little bit of a lack of interest, oh, maybe we need to work a little bit more on this or on that. Depending on parents, some are more willing to stay and talk and chat a little bit, while others are less inclined to discuss these topics. And with those parents, I will bring up in parent teacher conferences just because it's a more, I guess, structured meeting, to where some parents just, take it more serious when it's coming in a meeting instead of just a, informal conversation. Uh, Again, this depending on the parent's availability. If there's a lack of communication, I would definitely schedule conferences to carve out the time for the vital communication about the development. I try not to get too stuck on the um, I try not to get too stuck on making thing, just on conference, parent teacher conference, because it's such a structured place. But if parents are not really involved, or they're not showing much interest, especially if I see that a child is staying behind, is a little bit behind, I definitely make of a point to make those meetings. And one thing I like to do with all my students is observe moments in the classroom where I can see those skills in use, and then share them with parents. Whenever possible, we'll bring examples done in the classroom and explain to parents what we're trying to accomplish and how they can modify, to bring that activity at home. Culturally responsive teaching essentially means learning about your students' lives and family outside the classroom. So we can modify and adapt ourselves. I think I'm a parent myself. I know that I do things different than my neighbor. They know she has a kid too. And just learning about the children's preference and temperaments, and that be so helpful because I can try get a child who doesn't like animals to sort animals. They're not going to be interested. Just knowing the children, it's an essential thing. A strategy to connect with families about math is when I see a child that's showing more interest in a specific lesson, game, or toy, I ask parents how this relate to something that's being done at home. 9 times out of 10, they do oh, we did this at home or we do that at home. And then provide more details on how they can introduce more of those mathematical concepts with that preference. For parents who don't know, explaining that these concepts can be incorporated into everyday activities like sorting laundry, pointing out shapes, and even walking to the grocery store. Oh, does this aisle have more or less? Are these stuff bigger or smaller? Things like that. How culturally responsive teaching strategies families can how culturally responsive teaching strengths family connections. um, Culturally responsive teaching is essential, as every individual is rooted in their culture. It gives them a sense of belonging. When educators implement practice that respond to students culture, we automatically encourage their development and sense of belonging. So if we bring something from home, they automatically feel seen. And that's something that I have seen a lot with my daughter. We had to switch schools a lot, and knowing that, a little bit of that background, the cultural background, is definitely makes a difference. Cultural responsiveness begins at recognizing the role culture plays in everyone's lives, including how it impacts educators' work with students and families. Another way that a culturally responsive approach can assist educators in providing learning environments and materials that reflects children and families' cultures and language. Some of the questions I would ask the family is, for home resource, what are some of the activities that your child enjoys the most at home? So if they like dinosaurs or if they like cars, those are things that we can bring at home just to tailor those lessons. Priorities, I guess knowing what's really important for families and for their children to learn, especially where they're at right now. I think this is something to, as educators, we can't just be like, oh, you have to learn this, you have to learn that. And sometimes for parents, it's just not a priority. Routines, just asking, hey, how do you involve your child in activities? Maybe they can sort their toys, or they can help clean up laundry, or they can help. There's so many things that they can sort and classify at home. For the culture, I would ask, are there any everyday practices like cooking or games that are part of your culture, but also involve math? Some type of math concepts that you like us to know. In learning style, I feel like parents know their kids the best. How do you think your child learns the best? More in a structural, setting to where, oh, they need to sit down, they just focus a little bit better with this, or they enjoy more play-based activities. Explaining math concepts, simple concepts. Math for age 1 and 2 is interaction and exploration, counting, sorting, filling, dumping, and using words like bigger, smaller, more, and less. And to match that with the Head Start learning, early learning outcome for a framework. For the memory subdomain is singing songs about shapes and repetition about alphabet, and same thing with shapes, colors, animals. Same thing with selecting, farm animals. We can do, so it's just a lot of repetition. Reasoning and problem solving is when we play with puzzles. We allow students to take their time and think about the next step. A simple example of problem solving, with fitting blocks into the right shape, or building a tower with blocks and just matching the right color. Those are just very simple activities that we can do with basically anything that we have it at home or at school. The emergent mathematical thinking, again, repetition is one of the most effective ways for infants and toddlers to develop their emergent mathematical thinking. During circle time, we take the time to count. Some students are comfortable with only counting up to 10, while others are attempting to count up to 20. Of course, and I truly believe that we have to allow our students to choose to participate and not something that they have to do, because it's also important for the development to know that they have a choice. And imitation and symbolic representation and play, students benefit immensely from observing their caretakers and peer interactions. I believe that the setting the example by participating in activities with them is a more effective way than get them engaged than just simply showing them what to do. You know, it's the same thing. I want my students to go dance, but I'm not going to dance with them. I guess we are, you know, their role models. We are, they're watching us and everything that we do on an everyday and how we talk, how we move. So just being involved with them, it's a great way. Play and materials. Some of the examples I use almost every day is classroom supplies. We can sort crayons to specific or paper, different color paper, shapes, sorting animals, and sorting foam blocks. Caregiver collaboration, conversation and building. It's engaging in informal, respectful conversations during pickup and drop-offs. And just like I said, focus on everyday routines rather than the academics. It's just, you know, we can put academics into our everyday routine. We don't just have to be like, oh, we need to sit down and do this. You know, no, we can use it, you know, little things, simple activities, everyday activities that we do in order, and they can still learn just the same. Valuing home routines, encouraging families to see math in bathing, feeding, diapering moments. You know, we can be all done, or we can do more and less. And just having, you know, recognizing patterns and quantity at home supports continuity. Shared communication, always share photos and newsletter describing math at play. Offer a simple option of home suggestions like counting bites of food, or looking at our shapes, or, you know, like I said, oh, it's a big bite or it's a small bite, things like that. And here are my references. Thank you so much for watching. I do apologize. I'm really not good at making presentations, and I'm definitely not good at making slide presentations and recording myself. So I do appreciate you guys watching. Thank you.